Now, we've discussed conspiracies on here, including Super Bowl conspiracy between the Ravens and the 49ers, the lights going out. But Cone, being the hard-hitting investigative journalist and ethical, principled, moral man that you are, turns out you may have found another one that goes back even further. What did you and Watson dig around and discover?
Boys, Super Bowl III was fixed. I thought I knew everything there was to know about Super Bowl III. Joe Namath and the Jets guaranteeing the victory over the Baltimore Colts, led by Don Shula, until I heard a conspiracy this week that Super Bowl III was fixed. I had to share it with you guys. Okay?
Do you believe this before we get started? What's your level of belief? Because I'll tell you mine at the end.
My level of belief on this is about 5 right now. I wanted to share it with you,
out of 10.
With you guys.
Okay.
5 out of 10. I'm 50-50 right now because the evidence was
heavy early.
That's heavy early.
That's heavy
so
early.
I wanted to share it with you. You guys see if I'm on track or if I'm off base here, okay? To provide a little backstory here, the NFL had a monopoly on professional football for several decades, or at least so they thought, until the AFL began in 1960 and began to sign big TV contracts and sign big-name players, the biggest of which, Joe Willie Namath, was drafted in 1965 by the Cardinals of the NFL and the Jets of the AFL. He decided to sign with the New York Jets for a then-record $400,000.
Which back then it was worth $8 billion.
All of this resulted in the NFL and the AFL agreeing to a full merger, which would take place in 1970. However, both leagues agreed to hold a world championship game in the 3 seasons prior to the full merger. This became known as the Super Bowl. And just as many suspected, the NFL was far superior and was blowing out the AFL, with the Packers winning the first 2 Super Bowls. Well, having one league being far superior to the other jeopardized the new merger, which was going to increase revenue for everyone who was involved. Insert Carroll Rosenblum, owner of the Baltimore Colts, known as an active gambler who would even wager on his own team. Some even said that Carroll Rosenblum once forced the team to go for a touchdown rather than a field goal at the end of the game because he wanted to cover the 3-point spread.
If that's true, imagine how awesome that would be. You know how many times I've sat in front of the TV and was like, God, could you just give me the power to tell them not to knee it out? Or you know what? Don't kick the field goal.
And, he hits the upright again. That's impossible.
The Bears' season's going to end on a double doink.
Just try and score. Like, to have that power. You said Carroll Rosenblum?
Carroll Rosenblum
Had that power. Wow.
That's what they say. Now, the Baltimore Colts had the mighty Johnny Unitas, but this season, Earl Morrall was playing quarterback. Johnny Unitas was injured. Baltimore was still 13-1. Many considered this Colts team, led by Don Shula, to be one of the greatest teams in NFL history. The Jets, led by Joe Namath, big-time underdogs. Listen to this. The line started at 18 and moved to 15. Here's where the conspiracy really heats up. Bubba Smith, Pro Bowl defensive end, is on record years later saying, quote, something was happening during that game and I didn't know what it was. We were inside the 25 times in the first half and scored 0 points.
What did you think when you got the script in 2016 that said your career was going to fall off a cliff when you stopped believing in God?
The line opened up at 18, but then went down to 15 because a big money bet had been placed. And I know where that bet came from. Owner Carroll Rosenblum bet $3 million on the Jets.
The other team.
The other team, and only needed quarterback Earl Morrall to make sure the fix was in. He goes on to say, if you read the terms of the NFL and AFL merger agreement, if the AFL didn't establish credibility by the end of 3 years, the terms were null and void. None of the owners wanted the merger to fall apart. You have one of the owners with a team in the Super Bowl who's known to gamble on his team. Maybe put a $3 million bet in, move that line down a little bit. Here's Earl Morrall's stats from the game. 6 for 17, 71 yards, 3 interceptions.
Yeah, something stinks. And if you're going to try and buy anybody in football, it's got to be the quarterback.
Pete Rozelle, commissioner of the NFL, who helped lead this merger, was quoted as saying right after the Jets' victory, this is the best thing that could have happened for pro football.
Yeah, no, here's what it's insurance fraud. Or it's fraud in general to me. Like when you're looking at the contract, saying that all right, well, if we don't show credibility, then there's not going to be a merger. To me, that tells the whole story.
You think so?
That tells the whole story. There's so much more money to be made if it's a legit, just like any merger of big conglomerates or whatever that we see nowadays. I started out when you started at about a 2 out of 10.
You started out 2 out of 10?
I started out 2 out of 10. Now I'm 6.5 to 7 out of 10.
Real Paul Cruz situation.
You guys know I grew up a Miami
Real
Dolphins
Paul
fan,
Cruz
right?
situation.
I grew up a Miami Dolphins fan.
Yeah.
Right. So I had known about studied the undefeated seasons that they had and all that. I started to piece this together too after I heard about this conspiracy. Where did Don Shula go after he left Baltimore? Went to the Miami Dolphins. Super Bowl VII, just a few years later. What happens? The Miami Dolphins go undefeated, 17-0. Which player did he take with him from Baltimore? He took quarterback Earl Morrall with him. Now, Bob Greasy was the starting quarterback for the Dolphins. Not that season, though. Earl Morrall led the Dolphins to the undefeated perfect season. Maybe a makeup game? Maybe a makeup situation with the Colts having to throw the Super Bowl III?
David, I didn't think I was going to go down this rabbit hole, but you got me diving and looking around. I mean, I'm feeling. That's a legitimate one to me.
Now, here's why I'm only a 5 out of 10 on the conspiracy. Because Johnny Unitas, who was injured, he did come into the game. He didn't play well either, all right? He's 11 of 24. He threw an interception as well. Also, Joe Willie Namath could play football, man. And you kept telling the Jets that they were awful. They couldn't compete with the NFL. They couldn't compete with the Colts. They got a little chip on their shoulder. We've seen underdog stories before. I get it.
He doesn't even predict it. He said, I guarantee a Jet victory.
That's why I'm only a 5 out of 10 here. I wanted to see what you guys thought.
Have you heard anything from Earl Moore about the situation? Has he said
Don Shula came out and said there was no credibility to what Bubba Smith was saying.
Of course there's not. But here's my thing. What does Bubba Smith have to gain out of that? What does Bubba Smith have to, what's the positive side of Bubba Smith coming out and say that? I don't think that's something you would just make up. Don Shula's got a reason to keep it quiet. Don Shula's a legend. Like, not anymore. I mean, RIP, obviously, but back then, yeah. Why? Just like that. They're not going to tell you if there's a cover-up or something that big. We don't even know who killed JFK. We think we do.
CIA.
Like, if there's a cover-up at a high level, you're never going to find out. All right? So we're never 100% going to know the truth. But that clause in there in that merger where they have to show. So basically, their lives depend on it, on showing credibility.
Again,
a lot of people done a lot worse for a lot less.
That's what Bubba Smith said about the contract.
There's got to be, right? It's public knowledge, right?
We need to go find
I don't have
out.
to send a FOIA request to get this thing out, do I? I mean, I don't know. I'm a 6.5 out of 10 right now.
I just always thought it was a true underdog story for me. Joe Willie Namath coming there, chip on his shoulder. I guarantee you we will win. Beats the mighty Colts, and then someone slaps me with this.
But if anybody was ever going to be on the take, I know Joe Namath didn't play super well, which makes me think, if he's in that control of his abilities, maybe he just kind of downplayed it so it wasn't super obvious.
Here were his stats. Joe Willie was 17 of 28 in the game, 206 yards. I mean, he had a good game.
Yeah. Well, compared to the other
Earl
guy,
Morrall?
yeah, he's the greatest quarterback of all time ever. But if anybody was on the take, it would 100% be Joe Namath, right?
One of the things Bubba Smith was very upset about, they ran a flea flicker. The Colts ran a flea flicker in the game. They had run during the season before and thrown touchdowns on it. There was a wide receiver wide open on the flea flicker. Earl Morrall, which is the first read on the play, Earl Morrall throws to a different receiver who's covered and it's intercepted.
Yeah, something stinks. Something stinks.
That's fishy.
Yeah, fishy. Yeah, there's some merit to this.
You think so?
Maybe we should find this out.
We need to investigate.
Look, they've been on like the trying to find out what's going on at Oak Island for like 300 years. I feel like we can figure this out before then.
Super Bowl III, boys.
Yeah, I think it is. Tell us in the comments, do you think that was legitimate conspiracy there? I'm really starting to believe that.